listening to the Terrific Teacherpreneur, a podcast for teachers looking to grow a successful online business. Your host, Alex, was able to transform her Teachers Pay Teachers store from a small side hustle into a profitable full-time business. She now helps other teachers do the same. Listen along for actionable tips and helpful wisdom about business and marketing as a teacherpreneur. Here's your host, Alex.
Hello and welcome to the Terrific Teacherpreneur podcast. First up, I'm sorry if I sound a little nasally. I am kind of getting over a cold at the moment. And this episode's length is going to be similar to one of the last episodes I did where I mentioned it's basically dependent on how long my daughter stays at the park with the grandparents. So we will see. I actually have written notes for this episode, which is shocking because I just ramble normally. And I'm really excited for this. And so this episode is about a phenomenon, like an economic principle, which this is a lot of what this podcast is me kind of giving you food for thought, like something to think about, something to keep in mind. I find myself always saying things like that. And I just want you to have awareness of this concept. And then within your business, even within your life, it might kind of occur to you sometimes. And I think it will change your behavior a little bit. It basically applies to literally everything within your business. Every task, action item, everything you can physically do, whether you're creating a product or you're doing marketing, any platform, whatever, it applies to literally everything. And I think when you're aware of it, it can help you sort of change your behavior, like where you're spending your money, where you're spending your time, what you're devoting to things, which is really, really impactful because it kind of makes you really aware and realize the limitations to the actions that you take and how much money you can actually make. And although it's a little bit depressing, I think it's just something really important to be aware of, and it can help you shift things in the right direction, especially, and this has basically been designed especially if you're a really established seller that's been experiencing a little bit of a plateau in the last few months or years, or even a decrease in earnings. I think this might be really helpful. And then I think even if you're a smaller or a newer seller, this is still really, really helpful because I talk about product creation and things too. So anyway, I'm going to start diving in. So this episode is about something called the law of diminishing returns. If you haven't heard of it, this is a quick definition. Okay, so the law of diminishing returns, it's basically an economic principle stating that as an investment in a particular area increases, the rate of profit from that investment after a certain point cannot continue to increase if other variables remain at a constant. Now, I know what you're probably thinking if you're listening to that, because as I'm literally reading it and as I was researching it, it's one of those definitions that's really wordy and horrible and hard to understand. You're probably I don't know what any of that means. That makes no sense. Don't worry. I am going to break it down with real life examples so you know exactly how this works. Okay, here's the first one. Imagine that you are super thirsty, dehydrated, you're in a desert, or you're just average run-of-the-mill thirsty. As soon as you get water to drink, that first glass of water that you drink will give you the most satisfaction. I love this real life example. It's one of the best ways to describe this principle. And then if you have a second glass of water, you will get less satisfaction from that one. And the chances are that by the time you get to start drinking a third glass of water, you probably won't even finish it. And so this is an example of the law of diminishing returns. Each additional glass of water, it generated fewer returns or benefits than the previous one did, basically. In other words, you kind of get less bang for your buck the more that you do something. So here's some more examples. If you were studying for an exam and then you get 95% on it, spending more time studying will likely not increase your score by much. You sort of approached a point where further study isn't really worth your time. However, of course, if you scored a lot lower, 70% on an exam, then yes, spending more time studying would result in a higher score. But for the 95%, you've sort of reached that limit. You can sort of do it. It's something that it goes for the workplace too, or in your business. If you're working really long hours doing something, but you're not seeing an increase in productivity, you've approached the point where further work isn't worth your time. And then this is even beyond business stuff, this can apply to anything in your life. For example, if you're in a relationship that seems to be getting worse rather than better, you're constantly fighting or arguing with your spouse or partner or whatever, sometimes too much time has been spent on that other person. So basically at some point, we all reach diminishing returns in different areas of our lives. It's really important to be aware of that because you know where you're spending your time and your resources. But this is my favorite example. It's the final one. Imagine that you have a small garden and you're planting strawberries. So at first, when you add a little bit of water and fertilizer, your strawberries grow a lot and you get a big bunch of them. So you're happy, yay, my hard work's paid off. And then you think, okay, if a little bit of water and fertilizer made my strawberries grow this much, what if I added even more? So you keep adding more and more, expecting to get more strawberries each time. And at first it does work. You will get, some more strawberries. After a certain point, adding more water and fertilizer doesn't make much difference. And you can add a lot more, but only get a few extra strawberries. And that's because the plants can only use so much water and fertilizer effectively. After that, it's just too much. And so the law of diminishing returns is like this. You keep adding more and more of something, like water and fertilizer, to help improve something else, like the number of strawberries you want to get. There comes a point where adding more doesn't help as much as it did at the start, and it means that there's a sweet spot for how much effort, resources, or time you should use. And after that, it's just not as effective. And so now we've talked a little bit about what the law of diminishing returns is. I hope you're getting a bit of an idea now of how it works. I think the real life examples are way better than that horrible definition at the beginning. But you can use this law to your advantage by focusing basically on the most important tasks, not spending too much time on less important tasks. And in terms of business, basically a business's revenue will eventually reach a peak and it will cease to grow ultimately if all of your other factors remain unchanged. So if you keep trying to do one thing and you just keep doing it over and over and over again, you're like, I'm not seeing any growth. It's like you're watering and fertilizing the strawberries when you should be really focusing on maybe the quality of the soil or getting more sunlight or something else. So, you know what I mean? Like in your business, are you putting all your energy and time into this one thing? Maybe it's like creating products, you keep churning them out and like nothing's really happening anymore. It's like stopped working basically. You need to start directing your time somewhere else. Anyway, I'm now going to start talking more about TPT. So enough talk of water and strawberries, I promise. I want to share bunch of different examples in the TPT space, all the things that we work on and spend our time and money on, and then a little bit about how the law of diminishing returns can kind of affect those areas. And the idea here is that you might listen to some of these things and think, oh my goodness, that's me. I've been doing that, or that's something to think about. So let's start off with product creation. So when you're a newer seller, or like a brand new seller, and you have like literally no products in your store, you're making no money, and you add your first like 30, 40, 50 resources, whatever, you like start growing your store, it's great. You are going from earning literally nothing to earning something, whether it's $100 a month or $500, whatever. It's just an amazing growth. Basically, your efforts of product creation in the early days usually result in more money than you had when you literally didn't have a store, right? So it's pretty great. But there becomes a point in product creation where the law of diminishing returns takes effect, and it's different for everyone. Sometimes it happens really early, under 100 resources. You could have like 60 or 70 resources and they're not really selling, and you're making your 70th and your 80th and your 90th and you keep going, but really like, ooh, something's going on here because you should be able to make money from 50 resources, right? I find 100 is a great tipping point. I have used that as an example when I was trying to find the right people to join my program, Secrets for Success. I basically said, do you have 100 resources in your store and you're not actually making a lot of money? Because you should be able to make money with 100 resources. If you're not, something's going on, and churning out the 101st resource, another resource, pushing up to 150, 200, like this is not going to do anything for you right now. Why are you not able to sell the 100 that you currently have? Something's going on. So that's kind of like a big thing I'm really passionate about. And I tell that to my coaching students too. I'm like, okay, Sally, you've got 134 resources. I'm going to tell you right now, product creation probably needs to be paused because making your 135th resource is not going to suddenly tip you over the edge from earning, $300 a month when you want to earn $1,000. Like that's not going to be what does it. Why are your 134 products not selling? What's going on here? Let's figure this out. So there's definitely a point in product creation where people keep churning out products and it's just not pushing the revenue anymore. And that's because that's the water and the fertilizer in the strawberry example. Like you just keep making products, like watering and overwatering the strawberries. And like that's not what the problem is. Something's going on with your listings and your current resources. You are, in terms of the law of diminishing returns, you're basically, your profit rate is now going to start hitting its limit because you're not changing other variables. And so anyway, I don't want to go back to that definition. It was very horrible. But there's some really, if you want to do a quick Google, there's some really great images that help you understand this. This is something I can't obviously do over a podcast, but there's like a really great graph that goes up and then it kind of hits like a point and then starts going down, curves up and then curves down. The productive phase, like at the start of anything you do, you have that phase where you're just getting these gains basically. And then you hit the point of diminishing returns that you're not going down at this point, but it's like you're putting the same amount of effort and it's a slower gain, right? And then there's a point of maximum output. And this is where like the graph goes down, where you start to get negative returns. So everything you're doing is basically resulting in negative returns. Really depressing. But if you are one of those like really seasoned sellers that's experiencing a decrease in sales in the last few years, like you're at that point in the graph where you're in the negative returns bit, like you're still working on your business and it's actually giving you negative returns, which is really, really sad. So the graph can be really eye-opening. But yeah, we talked about the product creation. Now, this is obviously helpful for newer, smaller sellers who might still be churning out products and they've not really figured out how to optimize the ones they have. And so making new products isn't helping. But I know there's a lot of seasoned sellers out there, a lot of veteran sellers that still constantly release products every week or every month, constantly churning out new resources. And it's good to check in with yourself and say, okay, am I just doing this for the sake of it because I feel like this might help me make money? Is it actually making you money, or have you hit that law of diminishing returns point of no return at this point because you just, like I said, 0 to 50 products, that's like this great growth happens there. That same growth is not happening between 175 and 200 products. It's not happening between 800 and 900. Like there's certainly a limit there. So product creation is something to be mindful of. Not saying don't create products ever again, but whether you're a smaller or a bigger seller, there is a limit here and you need to find out whether you've got to that limit. And I know myself, I have about 400 resources in my store. I don't need to keep going and make 1,000. If I really want to make a resource or have something I'm really passionate about making, or I want to bundle something, yeah, I'll do it. But I'm not going to keep churning out new products every week for the sake of it, thinking that's going to help me increase my sales. Like I'm way wiser than that now. I know that I have 400 resources. I have 400 opportunities to sell. If they aren't selling, there's something going on. Making more resources there's just a limit to how much that's going to help me. So I am very aware of that. Okay, so the next example, product creation aside, organic marketing. So social media, for example, I think there's a point where just using social media in general, like, Instagram, for example, I joined in like 2019. I created like an account for my store. And I think in the first year or so, I wasn't making a lot of money or anything, but I was putting in this effort and, you'd get some followers or putting in these posts and, here or there, I'd probably make a sale. So I guess I was probably seeing some growth, but there definitely came a point where I was like, I'm putting in a lot of effort here, posting a lot of stuff, and I'm not really making any money. I very quickly, I think, hit that law of diminishing returns on the Instagram thing. So I don't post on my store's Instagram anymore because that would be a waste of my time, not going to help me grow my business. So I'm very aware of that. I think it's really important to be mindful of these things. Even if social media is working for you, whatever platform you're on, sometimes this effect kind of applies to maybe things like how much you post. Maybe you were posting 2 to 3 times a week and you think, hey, if I post more, will I make more money? So you bump it up to like 4 to 5 times a week. Maybe you do make a few extra sales. And you start thinking, I'll post every day. But I think there's probably just definitely a point where you get to where you are overdoing it in terms of how much time you're spending now. But your return is not really going up that same trajectory anymore, the way it was when you went from posting like once to twice to 3 to 4. Maybe that was really worthwhile. You increased your time, but you also increased your sales. And then you start going to every day, posting every day. And then suddenly it's a huge time commitment and you're not seeing that increase anymore. The sales aren't worth it. Like, yeah, there's a point where that return is negative. So that's another example to keep in mind. If you don't want to like quit a platform, how you use it, definitely this applies to that. So next up, ad spend. So like not the organic marketing, but just like if you're paying money for anything, you can research this a bit more, but basically this law applies to ads and money spent in a lot of ways, because you might spend $30 on a campaign. And if you bump that budget up to $35 or $40, you might see this increase in click-throughs. And it's like it was worth spending more. And then you keep increasing the budget more and more to 50 to 60 to 70. Like there becomes a point where you hit that law of diminishing returns, where you start putting in too much money and your click-throughs aren't actually going to be going up the same amount. And there's some really great examples. Like I said, Google it if you want to see the breakdowns. It'd be like, you increase your ad spend by like $10 and you see this like, 2-fold increase, whatever. But then when you increase it by $20, suddenly the click-throughs don't go up in that same trajectory anymore. Anyway, it's really interesting that if you pay for ads, this is definitely going to apply to that. And this is some other advanced topic, but hiring. So if you hire a VA, you go from being a solo entrepreneur to hiring your first virtual assistant or team member. You're going to see this huge increase in productivity. There's now 2 people working on the business, getting lots done. That's usually an example of that productive phase at the beginning of the law. So, you suddenly getting like this huge sort of increase in getting work done and making more money. But maybe by the time you go from your 4th team member to your 5th, you're suddenly not seeing that same return. Like, you're putting in obviously another whole wage, a lot of money, but you're probably not going to see the same huge increase in output and success. So there's probably a limit to how much you should hire, how much you should spend on hiring. That's probably true. I think it applies to everything, honestly. Speaking of money, anything you spend money on. This is actually why I'm not a huge fan of memberships. My husband used to work at a gym. Gyms are the entire premise of the gym industry is they love when people don't go. Like, they have, 800 members, but the gym floor itself only has the capacity for like 50 people or something, or 100 people. Like, they physically could not cope if everybody actually used their gym membership. They love it when you join and never go, or they love it when you only go like once a week. You're not causing wear and tear, you're not filling up the gym. Like, that's actually the entire business model is built on people who don't go to the gym. But memberships are a bit like that. Like, a lot of the time, and I say Netflix excluding, I get my money's worth there. A lot of the time we pay money repeatedly for something and we do not really get our money's worth. And the gym is like that for me sometimes. But I think, you'll be really careful if you are paying for a membership in the TPT community or a subscription of some kind, because the first month you join, you might pay whether it's $10 or $100, whatever. There's some really expensive things out there. And if you get all this new information or you're really, excited and gung-ho and you take all these action steps and you do all this stuff, that first month you were in that productive phase of really getting bang for your buck, basically. But 6 months later, you're still paying that same amount of money every month, but you're not really learning anything new at that point. You're not really taking any action. You're probably not doing as much as you did at the beginning. So you're not really getting your money's worth. And even if you try your hardest to keep doing things, like say you're in YDP or something, there's always just that limit to the point where you're just continuously putting in a lot of money, but not necessarily going to get that same return. Something to be super mindful with anything you spend money on. Yeah, anything in this business. That's honestly not what I'm not really a big fan of memberships. It's why I don't offer memberships. It's why I always just offer courses. So you just have this one-off payment. And in those first few months, you get all that bang for your buck and all the information you learn and all the stuff you do. But if you still get access to the content years later, but a year later, you're not still footing the bill for it and not getting the value. I've always hated that. So that's why I don't offer memberships. But yeah, I think something to keep in mind. Okay, so this is the end of part 1. I am going to continue talking about this topic in the next podcast episode, so stay tuned for part 2.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Terrific Teacherpreneur. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate that effort. Come back for more actionable tips and helpful wisdom in the next episode with your host, Alex. Until then.